A very good day to all my students. Welcome back to social science class. In earlier classes, we have discussed about ancient civilizations of the world. Today, we shall revise this chapter. As we have discussed, Egyptian civilization, Mesopotamian civilization, and Chinese civilizations had originated in river valleys. Egyptian civilization originated in Nile Valley. Mesopotamian civilization originated in Tigris and Euphrates Valley, whereas Chinese civilization originated in Huanghe Valley. Now let's discuss about Egyptian civilization in detail. Egyptian civilization could take birth due to the presence of the river Nile. So, Herodotus, the father of history, called Egypt as gift of Nile. Egyptians were expert farmers. They had invented calendar. They mastered in the art of writing, which was a symbolic language, consists of small drawings and has been called as hieroglyphics. The next about Nile Valley. The Nile Valley would transform into huge lake during rainy season. After dried up in the summer, this fertile land provided food for the people, grazing field for animals, and labor for hundreds of people. The Egyptians, during their leisure time, like peasants and normal citizens, used to engage in artistic works. The role of priest was created to interpret nature and explain about it. These priests were scholars and shouldered their responsibility of protecting written documents. The Egyptians believed in life after death. They believed that man had to give an account of his deeds on earth to Osiris. Do you know who is Osiris? Already you learnt, right? Yes, the most powerful god of life and death. Osiris is the most powerful god of life and death. As they have believed in the life after death, the Egyptians used to preserve the dead body. How they used to preserve? Let's see now. The dead body was smeared with various chemicals and wrapped with a thin cloth. The entire body in this way preserved. This sort of preserved body was called as mummy. It would be kept in a specially designed coffin with the items needed for their daily life and small dolls of cook and barber to fulfill their future needs. And this is an important question. What is called mummy and the mummification process. So you have to learn this. Next is about pyramids, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world. In the beginning, graves were created by carving into the rocks of the hills. As the Egyptians moved north, they had to construct graves in the desert itself. Thus, tall towers were built on the graves using huge blocks of stone in order to protect the eternal sleep of the dead. Kings and wealthy people vied with each other to build taller and taller towers. The Greeks called these structures as pyramids. Now let's move on to rulers of Egyptian empire. The kings of Egypt were called pharaohs. The word pharaoh means a person who lives in a palatial house. After 20 centuries, Arabian shepherd tribe called Hyksos attacked Egypt and ruled for 500 years. The Jews who came wandering through the deserts in search of shelter, they were assisting this Hyksos in collecting taxes and in administration. In 1700 BCE, Thebes drove Hyksos out of the country. After 1000 years, Egypt came under the rule of Sardanapalus of Assyria. The Persian Emperor Cambyses captured Egypt in the 6th century. Alexander occupied Egypt in 4th century BCE. Then, Egypt became the province of Macedonia. One of the Alexander's military general established the dynasty of Ptolemy. Ptolemy had founded the city of Alexandria. After Ptolemy, the last Egyptian queen was Cleopatra. The Romans started attacking her. She tried her best to save her country. Romans were feared of her beauty rather than her troops. Twice she was successful in the Battle of Romans, but Caesar's successor, his son-in-law Augustus, defeated Cleopatra in the battle. When Augustus planned to carry her away, Cleopatra consumed poison and ended her life. From then onwards, Egypt became a province of Rome. Now we have discussed about Egyptian civilization. Now let's move on to Mesopotamian civilization. The word Mesopotamia means the land between rivers. The two rivers are Euphrates and Tigris had made this vast barren land fertile. The Sumerians were the first ones to evolve a system of writing called cuneiform, which was used by the Babylonians, Assyrians and Persians about 30 centuries. The central area between the two rivers was called as Babylonia. Northern part of Babylonia was called Akkad and southern part was Sumer. The northern part of the Mesopotamia was known as Assyria. Here children, there are many, in this page itself, there are many one-word answers are there. So you have to learn by point wise. Take pencil and underline all these important points in your textbook. Now let's move on to the Ziggurat. What is called Ziggurat? Already you have learnt what is called Ziggurat. The Sumerians, the hilly tribes, who were worshipping gods on top of the hills. After coming to the plains, they built artificial hills and established their places of worship. These structures were called as Ziggurat. So what are called Ziggurat? The artificial hills established for worshipping by Sumerians were called as Ziggurat. As they did not know to build stairs, they surrounded this structure with sloping galleries. And the Jews who called it as Towers of Babel. The Jews were calling this structure as Towers of Babel. Now let's move on to hanging gardens of Mesopotamia. The hanging gardens were created on the banks of the river Euphrates around 7th century BCE. This was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. This was built by Nebuchadnezzar for his beloved wife Amitis, who was missing her motherland. In her motherland, there were flowers, hills, and the environment was pleasant and beautiful. So as to console her, Nebuchadnezzar has built these hanging gardens. Actually, in this structure, the trees and bushes were grown at different levels or in the terraced land. For the onlookers, this gave an impression of being hanging garden. Now let's see the Code of Hammurabi. Law codes of Hammurabi are the rock edicts found in 1901 CE. Hammurabi's law enforced the logic of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. These law codes were probably written to protect the rights of all sections of Babylonian society, especially women and slaves. This rock edict at present has been kept in the Louvre Museum of Paris. Now let's see about the rulers of Mesopotamian. In the rulers of Mesopotamian, Sumerians were the first one who were ruling. They were ruling by 4000 BCE. Followed by them, the Akkadians. The Akkadians overpowered the Sumerians, one of the tribes of Arabian desert, and they were known as Semites. After 1000 years of these Akkadians, they were overruled by Amorites, another Semitic tribe. Amorites were another Semitic tribe. Among the Amorites, Hammurabi was the most famous king who has coded the law. Next, after the Amorites, Hittites. The Hittites who came later occupied the valley and destroyed all that they could not carry away. And these Hittites were defeated by Assyrians, who were the followers of Ashura, the desert god. They were the followers of Ashura, the desert god. After Assyrians, the Chaldeans came to power. Who was the greatest king among the Chaldeans? Nebuchadnezzar was the greatest king among the Chaldeans. And he was the one who has built hanging gardens. After Nebuchadnezzar, by 6th century BCE, Persians attacked Mesopotamia and it has gone in the hands of Greek. Alexander the Great transformed this place of Semitic people into Greek province. Now we have discussed about Mesopotamian civilization. Now let's move on to the last civilization, that is Chinese civilization. Chinese civilization originated in the river valley Huanghe. The Mandarin word Huang means yellow. Huanghe River is called as symbol of sorrow. Do you know why? Because after the floods this river changed its course in an unpredictable manner and inundated the houses and agricultural lands. Now, did you understand why it is called as symbol of sorrow? Now, let's move on to major dynasties which ruled ancient China. The Shang dynasty was the first family which ruled Chinese civilization. Shang dynasty ruled between 18th century to 12th century. The Zhou dynasty overpowered Shang dynasty and continued the good traditions of the Shang culture and ruled till 250 BCE. The Zhou dynasty has the social hierarchy system. The kings were in the highest position, followed by government officials, and the next level merchants, craftsmen and peasants, and in the lowest level was slaves. The prisoners of war were made slaves by the kings. Now let's see the Great Wall of China. And this question can be asked in the short notes. The Great Wall of China was constructed by Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi, who was the one ordered that the walls of the northern Chinese states to be connected. This enabled the northern walls to ward off the attacks of invaders from the north. The construction of the Great Wall began in the 7th century BCE and continued till 16th century CE, that is in the Common Era. The worn-out parts were repaired and strengthened. When the work was completed, it stretched to more than 5,000 kilometers, and it is the one of the 7 wonders of the world. Now let's learn about military power of Chinese civilization. The Shang kings spent quite an amount of time in conquest and battles. Hence, the army was in prominence. The soldiers enjoyed a dignified place in the society. Soldiers wore bronze helmets and metal armors. They were using bronze daggers, axes, bows and iron-tipped arrows. Now let's learn about the occupation of Chinese civilization. Shang dynasty people highly depended on agriculture. They grew plenty of rice. Apart from rice, they grew cotton, and Chinese used to wear thin cotton dresses. Chinese engaged in silkworm rearing, and they were the first one to introduce silk to the world. Silk manufacturing was a prominent industry in ancient China. Now let's learn about ancestor worship. Ancestor worship is a very important part of ancient Chinese society. When someone died, the ancient Chinese believed their spirit lived on in the afterworld. They believed their ancestors had magical powers that could punish them or could help them make wise decisions. To keep their ancestors happy, they brought gifts of food and wine to special places or temples. They held many celebrations to honor their ancestors. The dead body was buried along with various wooden articles, parts, bronze vessels and other objects. The tombs of kings used to be quite large. And Chinese were believing that, and it was a custom of the Chinese to worship their ancestors. Another important contribution of Chinese was porcelain. It is believed that porcelain originated in China. Semi-porcelain objects were in use from 1600 BCE. By the time of Han Dynasty, that is 200 BCE, glazed porcelain had been developed. It had developed into an exotic art. The ancient Chinese used to bury their dead along with these porcelain parts. Children, in today's class, we have revised the ancient civilizations of the world. All the three civilizations are very important civilizations, and you have to learn it properly, and you have class test by next week. Class test will be conducted on 13/8/2020. That is on Thursday, coming Thursday, next week Thursday, the test will be conducted for you. The question paper will be posted in the group and you have to keep your test book ready for the test. Children, be sincere and honest while writing the test and you have to get it signed from your parent. The test should be posted to me in the stipulated time, whatever I have mentioned, within that 1 hour or 2 hours, you are supposed to submit your test. Otherwise, it will not be considered. Hope you all would have understood this point. So, prepare well for your test. Complete your classwork. The completed classwork has to be submitted to me by Monday. Okay, thank you children.